Buonasera. I'm director Percival Rubens. We're here to talk about The Demon. The Demon received the Italian Golden Camera Award for Best Direction, and it received the Italian Golden Pencil Award for Best Screenplay. It was a really fun piece. When I was little, I used to read a lot of short stories. And that's where I got the idea for this script. There was a short story I loved by Robert Bloch. It's called Enoch. Now, if you're not familiar with Enoch, the story is this guy has this demon living inside his head, and it makes him kill people. And then it comes out and eats the remains or whatever, and then goes back inside him and makes him kill again. Well, theatrically, you can't really do that very well. You can do it with maybe a puppet. You can do it with maybe a CGI character, stop motion animation, that kind of thing. And it's just, I don't know, it has something lacking to it. It's more comedic than it is actually scary. But some people might be able to do it a lot better. I don't know. I took a different perspective with the production. Instead of doing Enoch from the point of view of the story, where you're all in first-person narrative and it's in the mind of the killer, I decided to tell the story from a third-person omniscient narrative. This way, you're looking outside of the story itself, in at the story. There's this murderer running around killing people, no one knows why, and those people have lives. And so I worked outside of the story of Enoch. But it's somewhat similar based on Robert Bloch's Enoch. Now, I was also playing around with the idea of a psychic investigator. In the 80s, psionics had a lot of interest and a lot of mystique and a lot of problems. A lot of people didn't like psionic abilities. A lot of people... It's one of those subjects that people kind of touch on but don't really like touching on. And so I kind of enjoyed it. And this shows kind of the abilities of a psychic crossed with the paranoia and the misunderstanding of psionics. The people want results immediately, and no one can give him those kind of results. You know, and he's just trying to solve the case as best he can. And so then you have the kind of storyline. You have how this one character is murdered by this demon, and you have a psychic brought in. Now, you don't necessarily know the girl is murdered. You eventually find that out. So, that kind of thing. And then, of course, they're tracking down the murderer through the psychic impressions, and then the misunderstandings and the, oh, maybe you're actually the murderer kind of thing. And it turns back on the psychic investigator. So we have a lot of fun with that. There was a little bit of open interpretation within the script. I had written a nice story, but I had looked at anyone and said, if you have any ideas of anything to add, go ahead, let's talk about it, let's add to it. And from that, it was a very fun production. It was kind of like a student production, and where I brought in information from the cast and let the cast take what I had written and fly. And they really did. And they had fun doing it. My co-star from A Blade in the Dark stars in this as our female lead, and she and some of the other girls on the set had some knowledge of things like yoga, meditation, things of that nature, so they brought that in to their character, and they did a small section on that. And so we had fun with it, and we just let them experiment and just have a blast. Our world itself, I wanted to make it a more fantasy feeling. I didn't want you to just look at the picture and say, oh, that's where it's shot. I wanted you to get kind of a, where actually is this kind of viewpoint. So for that, I did it in 2 locations. We shot in Italy and we shot in France. We had a great time. And of course, you know, the actors and actresses are sitting there going, wait a minute, we can like tour the Champs-Élysées right over there? And I'm like, yeah. You know, so, you know, we just had an absolute blast. And we had a great time filming. I got to do some interesting tricks with cameras. I was learning in all of this how to work with cameras, how to be a director. And Mario Bava had set up a lot of devices to help me out with that. I did a lot of tripod work with cameras, and we had a box that had remotes to it. That way I could work with a box and I could adjust the focus or adjust the focal length, or I could zoom in, zoom out, do wide angle, narrow angle, just from the box itself with each individual camera. And then we had a switch box, so I could cut back and forth between the Steadicam, between the tripod, between each tripods, and back to the Steadicam, and then back to a tripod, and things like that. So it got to be a lot of fun being able to just sit there and play with these fun devices that Mario Bava had developed. So I could just go in and out of this camera, that camera, and it made life really fast and really fun. We shot this very quick. We shot this in like maybe a week tops. And it was a real joy to do. Our opening scene is on one of the most famous stretches of Italy. It's a beachfront that if you look out across the sea, you can see Sicily. And it's probably one of the most famous beach areas. The shoreline was also used in Roger Corman's Pit and the Pendulum. I think we used the same shoreline for Knives of the Avenger. And we just had a lot of fun with the production. I got to bring in my grandmother. This was her, I think, her last big theatrical production. Unfortunately, she died several years later. But she had an absolute blast. She was the neighbor lady, the wife of the either priest or cop. I forget exactly what he was in the script. And she just had a lot of fun with that. And we got to bring in a lot of fun actors and actresses, some people who worked with me in numerous productions. Cameron was fantastic. I love working with Cameron. He's one of my best friends. He and I started working together on a film for Mario Bava called Knives of the Avenger, in which I play Moki. He's a fantastic person. He's a wonderful actor. And he's great to work with. And he's up for anything. He's literally up for anything. When Mario Bava started working with me as a director, Cameron came on in one production or another, and he said, let me be the star of his shows. If you ever need an actor, if you ever need somebody, if he can't find people, call me, I'll do it. And he was great for that. I worked with him on Haunts, I worked with him in this, and I worked with him in Nightmare on Wax, and a few other productions. And he's just a joy. He's so much fun. He's up for anything. He'll do anything. And he's great. And he has great ideas and viewpoints. He might sit there and look at me and say, well, what about doing it this way? And I'd go, oh yeah, that's cool. Let's try that. And even if it didn't work, you know, we just had fun trying out a different angle, and then we went back to the original angle or whatever. You know, I mean, the fun thing about shooting that fast is because you're shooting at that kind of speed, you have the room and the latitude to sit there and do something 3 times just in case there's a better idea, you know. So we had a lot of fun with that kind of addition to the show. And we had a number of actors who came in, big stars that, you know, we kind of just have them use stage names and don't let anyone know who they are, because after all, you know, God knows if this film's actually going to do anything, kind of thing. And they were great for that. We brought in a friend from Monty Python who got to do a serious role for once. He was the driver of the car that picks up our hitchhiker and dies immediately. And he had so much fun. He was just, oh my God, I can do something that's not comedy. Wow, neat. I can even die. So cool. And he was just a joy to work with. He really was. And it was just a complete away from everything he'd done in theater. And he had so much fun working with us on it. Our demon was a composite. It's 2 actors' work. It's me working occasionally in front of the camera as my cameo shots here and there, and it's Christopher Lee, and Christopher went uncredited, and we just had a blast with him. And he and I worked on a number of films together. We rarely got to actually share the same picture. I mean, we were never really equal in most of the productions. We were like, he'd be this character and he'd do his shots, and they'd shoot me in one scene there, one scene here. So we had a lot of trouble trying to work together in a production. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 films in where we're actually in the same shot. And it's a rare thing when that kind of thing happened. So in this, we couldn't necessarily be equal, but we could share the same character. And we had a blast doing that. We had absolute fun doing that. So, he and I got to switch back and forth on our demon. And then, of course, you have the end sequence where we're killing the demon. And we have a very dangerous setting because we've got an actual bathroom with porcelain. We've got water on the floor. We've got soap on the floor. Everything is extremely slippery. And they looked at me and said, now, how are we going to do this so it's safe? And I said, well, we're going to shoot it at high speed. So we're going to do everything very slowly, almost like it's in slow motion. The slower, the better. Don't worry if you don't think it would look good. If it's too fast, it's going to really look strange. So do everything as slow as you possibly can. And when we did that, Christopher got through the whole thing and he said, this is cool. I was terrified of this, but this is great. This is fantastic. I'm just not sure it will look good. And I said, don't worry, it will. And he stayed around for dailies to make sure, and he said, oh, that's just fantastic. That's absolutely amazing. Because we were shooting at high speed, and it didn't look like it was high speed. It looked like it was shot in normal position. So we had a lot of fun with that. The actresses were great. They're absolutely phenomenal. I remember looking at the actresses going, now, it doesn't matter to me, okay? I'm not in this thing to try and, do the whole Hollywood kind of bull. I'm just learning the whole thing. So I'll leave the whole concept of nudity up to you. You can either take off your clothes, you can leave your clothes on. It's not important to the picture. We're not selling it for the sex, we're selling it for the horror. So you can do whatever you want. And the girls just had fun with it. They just had an absolute blast. They did whatever they wanted in every scene. And they were amazed because no director had ever given them that kind of latitude. And a lot of the times people, when they worked with me as a director, loved the kind of latitude I could give them. Because I would look at them and say, whatever you want, let's try it. And then we do maybe a thing without the camera rolling and just rehearse the sequence of how they wanted it done. And then I would tweak it this way or that way, and then we would go with that. So it was a lot of fun. It was almost like a student production in that sense. And we had so much fun that way. We really did. And there were a few things that were just simple and easy. This was probably one of the most joyous films we got to work on. Nothing went wrong. Everything actually went right for a change, which was a blast. In my films, everything went crazy, but not in this picture. In this picture, everything was just smooth, straight, and simple. And it was great. The lake we used in the production, I think we used in several films. I forget exactly where it is in Italy. But we had a lot of fun with so much things. Let me think. Sometimes it's hard to do commentary without showing the film itself. I'm learning that as I'm doing this series. Um, but I think I'm kind of getting the feel of it. The whole murder section thing, we had looked at a lot of productions of horror films and a lot of reading of history of horror films, and we had learned that people had done a lot of things the same way throughout most of theater, and you can kill people hundreds of ways in theater. You really can. So we were trying to experiment with different ways, and we worked in the plastic bag and the garrote, which we did safely. We had a form of cellophane that was breathable. You could actually breathe through, and it didn't actually fully cover the head. It was only like a partial head cover. So you had oxygen going in. The actors were perfectly safe every which way but loose. So, I mean, I'm a stuntman first, actor second, director, writer last kind of thing. So I always made sure everything was perfectly safe before we did anything at all. And, so we had a lot of fun with that. We came up with a concept of a razor nail attached to a glove. And we did this, I think it was before the whole craze with Freddy Krueger. I mean, this is the 80s, so it's kind of difficult to tell when, exactly what happened when, but I think this was before all of that. And if you want to say I was inspired by Wes Craven, go right ahead. Wes was a great friend. I wouldn't presume to think he was ever inspired by me, but Wes was just great. I used to talk a lot with Wes, and I did work a lot with John Carpenter. So we had a lot of fun in talking with a lot of things. When I had finished The Demon, we had shown that to some of the American directors, and they were like, "Oh my God, that is incredible! Really?" And that was when Mario Bava was trying to go, "Why don't you take him under your wing, teach him tricks?" And the funny thing was Wes Craven, because Wes was sitting there going, "After seeing this, I think he could teach us a few things. Who cares? Just let him go. Let him do whatever he needs to do." And that was a lot of fun. So we enjoyed that. And so yeah, if you get a chance to see The Demon, it's a fun production. I had a blast. Everybody that worked on the production had an absolute blast. And so, see you in pictures.